Hey everybody, welcome back to the Renaissance Woodworker. I'm Shannon Rogers, your host, and welcome to Get Woodworking Week 2015. This is the week when the woodworking community kind of rallies together to talk about subjects that are approachable for the beginner woodworker. We want to get more woodworkers into this lovely craft, so I think one of the best ways to get started in woodworking is to pick a project. The project should be approachable, but I also think it's great if it adds a couple of challenges just to kind of kick your game up a notch a little bit. So today I'm going to build a little bent lamination desk clock. Now this desk clock comes right out of the pages of Wood Magazine, issue 182, and I want to say thanks to Lucas Peters over at Wood for backing me up and making the article and the plans and everything free and available to everyone to download, and you can just click the link below this player in order to get the plans. You'll also find a link to Schlauber & Sons, and they provide the hardware, the clock faces, and the stainless steel rods that the clock itself stands up on. You also can get the veneer for this. There are six sheets of veneer per clock, and I've got enough for 3 clocks to make here. They'll give you a nice combination of really figured veneer for the face and some just kind of normal, plain, straight grain veneer for the interfaces. Now you can follow the step-by-step instructions in the Wood Magazine article, but I'm going to deviate from that. I'm going to be building this using nothing but hand tools. The great thing is there's very little required to build this. Really, all you're going to need is some regular wood glue, turning saw, some way to drill an 1/8" hole, a block of wood for your form, and your sheets of veneer. At the heart of this project is this bending form. You have some artistic license here to create your shape how you like it, but I'm going to follow the wood plans and use the shape they suggest. I have printed out the patterns included with this project, and I printed out 2 copies of them and just using an aerosol glue adhered it to the side of the blank. There's also a part of the pattern that you bend around the end, and this will help line up the hole for the post. Now, the one difference you'll find in building this by hand and then building it on, say, like a bandsaw is I want to make 2 copies of this, and I want to glue another one to the other face, but it has to be a mirror image. So actually what I've got is the printed side of this is actually down, is glued against the block itself, and I just traced the shape onto the other face. Now I've got a mirror image, and this allows me to really track my turning saw. When I can see the shape on both faces, I'll end up with a much squarer cut. Now it doesn't really matter which wood you choose for the form, but I figure hardwood is going to stand up a lot better over time. See, once you make one of these forms, you can reuse it again and again, and this project really lends itself to batching out multiple copies. In fact, here is a bending form for this project that I built probably 7 or 8 years ago when this article originally came out in Wood Magazine. I could use this again today if I didn't want to show you how I go about making it by hand. So you want to start with a blank that is about 1.5 inches thick, needs to be at least 3 inches wide, and you want it to be, the pattern itself is 7 inches long, but I want the form block to be more like 11 to 12 inches long to give me a little bit of space outside the pattern that I can stick in a vise, and I can still saw the entire pattern that way. The pattern from Wood Magazine allows for a 5/32 of an inch kerf, and that is to approximately equal the thickness of the 6 sheets of veneer. What I'm going to do is just shoot right down the middle of this kerf and see how that works. If necessary, I can work my lines back to the lines on the pattern here through carving gougers or files and rasps or whatever. But I think that this will work because this laminate piece is essentially a standalone element. It doesn't have to join into anything else. If the curve is a little bit off, or maybe you get a little bit of spring back or something like that when you pull it out of the form, it's not going to be the end of the world. You can see why the pattern on both faces is a good idea. But I've also shifted the block to be straight up and down so that I can sight down the board and look at my blade and just kind of eyeball that I'm sawing square. As always with a turning saw, you want to anticipate the curves. You need to begin to start your turn before you get to the turn. Think of it as if there's a little bit of a delay in the saw. Okay, on the home stretch here. Now you can probably see why making the form a little bit longer than is required is so useful, because I still got all this down here held in the vise, and I can just keep sawing. But also, this keeps this kerf nice and tight together because I've got all this wood below it. So once I get down here past my line, I know I'm good, and then I can come in, cross-cut that out, and this will just break apart into my two pieces. So let me take a look at my form and see how we did. The fine turning saw blade that I used left me with a really smooth cut. I can look, however, just at the shape of these humps, that they're a little bit off square. So I obviously deviated a little bit from one side to the other, but frankly, it doesn't really matter. As I mentioned before, because this bend is not joining to or referencing off anything else, we can leave it that way. In fact, it might make it even a little bit more interesting. In the past, when I've made this clock, I've done it both the method you just saw with a turning saw and on a bandsaw. And frankly, everything went together exactly the same. So cut yourself a little slack if you go a little bit off square. It's certainly not the end of the world. And probably when you go to glue up the laminates, you may find that it doesn't exactly match the form anyway. We're just trying to impart the general shape. So as kind of an introduction to bent lamination, there's a lot of forgiveness in this particular form. Now, before I start loading veneers into here, I need to prepare them. I need to wet the veneers and actually clamp them up in a form like I've done here. This is the other form I showed you earlier. These are just dry clamped in here. I wet them in a bowl. So you want to grab yourself a bowl of water and you want to line up all of your veneers how you want them. And what I do is I take the face, my front face, I position that down on the bench top, and I'm going to load these into the form from back to front. And if you look at the pattern, you'll see there's a line here that says face veneer here. So I'm going to set that to the side, and this is the back of the clock. Starting from the back of the stack, load that in. Literally, I'm just dumping them in. They're soaking up the water. There's no reason to set these in here because the veneers, commercial veneers, are so thin. And these are actually pretty thick veneers that they send you. I'd say they're at least half, again, thicker than some of the commercial 1/10 veneers that you would find. And then my face veneer. And it's nice because the surface tension here really kind of holds these all together. And you can see there's quite a bit of overlap from the form to the actual veneers. Now I'm going to clamp that together. So what I like to do is start on one end with one of these quick clamps. Come back to the other side. And clamp that down. So now I'll take a serious clamp. I'll with a lot more holding power. Put that centered right over this center hump. And I want to start cranking that down. And as you can see, as I do that, the outer clamps come off. I'll come back with another of these F-style clamps. This should be all I need. Again, I'm not gluing anything up here. I'm just kind of pre-forming the veneer, getting them wet, letting them be a little pliable. I'll set them in this form. So now you can see I'm right on that form on both sides. And there's really no reason to hog out the full kerf and end up with that 5/32 inch gap. So this is going to set for 24 hours. All right, these have had plenty of time to sit here in the form. So I want to pull them out. All right, so invariably there'll still be some moisture in here. Right in the center, you can see a little bit of discoloration. These are okay. I mean, this has been probably about 30, 32 hours they've been in here. But what I want to do is set them aside and let them dry out completely. Meanwhile, what I need to do is prepare the form for glue up, and that's just a matter of taking some clear packing tape and wrapping the whole form in it so that when you glue this up, you won't glue it to the form itself. Through the miracle of modern television, I have another one here that's all dried out and I'm ready to glue it up. So again, like I said, these are really well suited for batching out more than one at a time. So what I want to do is, this is my face. This is the front of it. I'm going to flip the whole thing over. I'm going to grab the back of the form, drop it in the form, and just kind of work my way through with the glue. I'm using Titebond 2 here, just regular old wood glue. You really don't need extended open time or anything like that. This glue up doesn't take that long. It's just a matter of brushing on a consistent coat throughout. And just recognize you're going to make a big gooey mess. So I've got a little bit of wax paper sitting underneath this so that I don't completely cover my bench in glue. Now I will be putting glue on both faces of the veneer. I haven't experimented. I'm sure you probably could get away with only gluing one face of the veneer, but you know, why risk it? It's not going to take that much longer to apply it to both faces. Just make sure that you stop when you get to the first face, so you don't put glue all over that face. Set it back in the form. And basically, I think you get the idea. You work your way through all 6 sheets. I think you could use any number of glues for this. I like to use hide glue a lot. I could use hide glue here. I'm specifically trying to keep this project to very, shall we say, common tools and glues. So, and you know, the Wood Magazine plans and description and everything says just use Titebond as well. I've got a couple of these clocks kicking around. Family members have them. I've got one, well, my wife has one on her desk that are, what, 6 or 7, maybe even 8 years old, and they have not delaminated from using something like regular old Titebond. So no reason to really overcomplicate this and use fancy glues or hot hide glue or anything like that. Not for this simple of a project. The other thing you need to be thinking about is your shop environment. How dry is it? How long is it going to take for the glue to set up? But more importantly, how warm is it? We are experiencing a, what do they call it, a polar vortex and some sort of Arctic blast or something on the way that's supposed to make our 7-degree polar vortex look like child's play. In order to get the shop to a temperature that the glue is happy with, above 60 degrees, I've actually had to have a couple heaters running in here. Normally I've got just one heater and that's enough to kind of keep it into the low 60s. With it so cold right now, I've struggled to keep it in the 50s. Okay, they're all stacked in place. Drop that on and you can see, because we went to that extra measure of pre-forming these, it already kind of clicks and slots into place. And I can just grab all of my clamps and reapply clamping pressure. And there comes the spooge. If you want, you can put some blue tape around this to make sure the layers stay aligned, but because we preformed them like that, they kind of lock together almost like a jigsaw puzzle, so it's really not that necessary. Good clamping pressure. Coming together nicely. Just gonna swipe off a little bit of this squeeze out so I can get a better look at the form. And let's be honest, let's not have it drip all over my clamps. I periodically just put some wax on my clamps, which really helps to have glue just peel right off. If you've never done that before, it's a good time to do it before this glue up. So as I look into that form, I can see it's adhering to the shape perfectly. So I'm going to set that aside. Titebond cures pretty quickly, but I'll give it a full 24 hours to cure. While the clock bodies are in the clamps, I can move on to cutting out the bases. And the Wood Magazine article actually calls for a 2-inch circular base. They used poplar and painted it black. It's a 3/8 inch thick base. I just so happen to have a piece of 3/8 inch thick ebony that I've been hanging on to for a long time. So this just seems like fortuitous, so I'm going to go with this, but certainly painting it black is fine. I do think something that's darker than the base itself and something that is unfigured is a good idea, so it doesn't detract from the figure of the clock. Now you can use a compass, or if you've got a circle template, you want to draw out a 2-inch circle. And ultimately, I could go ahead and cut them out with a turning saw, but since I've got to drill holes in these as well, I have to drill a 5-degree hole in the base. It's easier that I can clamp it down with a holdfast and drill those holes now. If I wait until I've sawn this out, I've got very little spot to hold on to it while I drill. What I need to do is centered and a 1/2 inch in. I need to mark a hole. So basically, since it's a circle, I can mark a 1/2 inch in. I'm just going to use a bird cage awl to mark those holes. Now I want to drill these holes at 5 degrees. So I've got this angle setter I got from Veritas. I've got it set at 5 degrees. I'll bring my bevel gauge up and lock in that setting. Okay, I've got an 1/8 of an inch twist bit in my egg beater drill and one of these stop collars on here. I've got to drill a 1/4 inch depth, and because I'm working in 3/8 of an inch stock, I really can't afford to go any beyond that. All right, the bird cage awl has made a very nice starter hole for me. So the twist bit drops in there nicely. Now I just want to set my bevel gauge up, and I'll step back and sight right down the plane here and line up my bit with the blade on my bevel. Once I've got that alignment right, I widen my stance and kind of position my body comfortably at that angle. It makes it a lot easier to maintain it if I'm not contorting myself in some kind of awkward position. And that's it. It's not a very deep hole, but the stop collar really saves me there. Now I can go ahead and cut these out with the turning saw or a coping saw or a fret saw. It's really up to you. It's going to feel like an absolute breeze working in this really thin stock after going through that 3-inch wide form. I opted to use a fret saw here because I've got a really fine blade that will leave a really clean cut that shouldn't take much to smooth out and get finish ready. This is a, 28 points per inch blade. I'm using what's called a bird's mouth fixture here. It works fantastic because I'm letting gravity control the verticality of the saw. It makes it real easy to make a perfectly plumb cut. Just be good to keep your fingers behind the blade. Believe me, I've been bit before. Now I'm just going to grab a rasp and doing my best to work with the grain around the circle, polish this up. I went straight to my modeler's rasp here. It's my finest grain rasp just because I had used that fine tooth saw blade. If you'd used a more aggressive saw blade, you might be able to come to a more aggressive rasp, but I also was pretty much right on my line. So as you can see, I managed to save a fair amount of time by choosing the right saw blade and, well, frankly, sawing to the line. That's just a beautiful surface. Come back with a file and break that top edge. I'm not going to worry about the bottom edge, obviously, because that goes down. Then you can prepare either a little bit of epoxy or some CA glue and glue the hardware rod into the base, and we're ready to move on to the clock body. They should be hopefully dry by now. All right, let's pull this out of the clamps. And invariably, it's not going to just pop apart. There's usually, it wants to stick, and that's actually a good thing. The pattern that we wrapped around the back side here already has a mark on it where you want to drill a hole. You want to drill a hole perfectly vertically in. Again, it's an 1/8 hole, and it needs to go 2 3/8 inches deep. I've got my same 1/8 drill bit, and I've got it set so that it's 2 3/8 inches to the chuck itself. So I'll go ahead and clamp this in the vise while it's still kind of stuck together. I could pry this apart, but I want to hold it firm. The form will actually back up the veneer so that I don't get blowout. Because what's going to happen is the drill is going to come through here, bust out this side and through the back, and I don't want a bunch of blowout on the face here. Perfectly vertical. All right, let me pull it out of the vise, and I just want to pop it free Usually what happens is the glue squeeze out on the side ends up kind of bonding the form together, and you can either kind of pry it apart with a screwdriver. Just make sure you pry it into the ends, because all this part around the end is going to be cut away. But I think, there we go. There we go. So there is my clock body, and I've got holes drilled through at just the right angle. So now I need to saw it out and clean it up. One thing you want to do is keep the form around, because it makes a really nice cradle to hold your piece steady. The plans from Wood Magazine give you a shape for the clock, and what I did is I used a little bit of stencil materials, just a flexible kind of clearish plastic material. I was able to trace out my own shape here, and because it's flexible, I can bend it into place and transfer my pattern right onto the laminate. One thing that's key is that you want to line up the center line on the pattern with the center line on the clock body. And there's no center line marked, but the drill holes actually perfectly mark the center. And that's the beauty of this kind of clear, flexible plastic, is I can sight through it, see those drill holes, and because I've got two of them here, well, 2 points equal a line. And on the pattern itself, I've got marked where that first hole goes. So it's pretty straightforward. It's just a matter of manipulating it and getting it in the right spot. Now you could probably make your life really easy and tape this down, but hey, I've got 5 fingers on one hand, right? And there's a line on the bottom of the pattern here that marks where I want to cut it off. So I'm going to make little tick marks on either side of that I can connect with a ruler. And that's my shape. Now, one other thing that I do need to do, line this back up. I've got a hole right here in the center where I'm going to drill for the clock face. And I'm actually going to use scratch awl there. But the first thing I want to do is saw along this cut line on the bottom. So pressing this firmly so that these two kind of ripples register, what that does is set the angle perfectly. This is the angle at which it will intersect the base that we made earlier. It is that 5-degree angle. First cut, and now I'm making the rest of this just a perfectly vertical cut, so it really doesn't matter if it rocks around on me. I just want to stay as close to my lines as I can. Alright, there's the clock body. So now I need to clean it up. Okay, there's my first edged, nice and cleaned up. I'll kind of run it at a slight angle in case there's any fuzzy marks working across the grain. Now onto the side. Makes these great looking shavings. Alright, almost. Just make sure you keep your fingers well out of the way of the cut line here, or you'll be adding some dye to your project. There we go. Got a little bit of a hollow in the middle. Once we work the two ends flat, there we go. Clean up the face. I'm going to go back to the form, use it as a cradle, but I'm going to stick some double stick tape on the back just to secure it into its form. Then I can take this whole block and I can actually clamp it between dogs or clamp it in a vise or whatever and scrape from there. But before I do too much cleanup, I need to drill a hole for the clock face. That's a 1 3/8 inch hole. I've got a 1 3/8 inch Forstner bit, and I'm just going to do that over on my post drill. I think I'm through. Yeah, there we go. Just take your time. You don't want to try to take off huge amounts at once. I could come in here with a chisel or something and try to remove some of these lumps of glue, but I think I'm just asking for trouble if I try to take off too much at once. There, that feels flush. I'm just gonna work till that discoloration is gone from the glue. Okay, I think that's it. Just this one little spot right down here. That feels fantastic. Peel off the glue. And now I need to repeat this on the other side. So I'll grab the other half of the form, use some tape to secure it down, and scrape that side. But once you've got this all cleaned up, it's on to finishing. I'm using some Watco semi-gloss aerosol lacquer here, and I'm just going to put a light coat on the base. And I'll flip it over and start from the back side. Make sure you get the edges. Flip it over and do the front. Because of the kind of rippled design, it makes it real nice because you don't get a whole lot of surface contact on the paper here. But in the end, I'm going to put about 3 coats on here. Lacquer, aerosol lacquer especially, is wonderful because I could recoat in probably 10 minutes, but I'll give it maybe 20-30 minutes and I'll recoat and go up to 3 coats total. Just slide this other one down the post, and then the little clock faces that come with the kit, they perfectly fit this 1 3/8 inch hole, and they will snap right in the hole, and you've got a nice snug fit. And of course there's a little plastic keeper back here that's actually preventing the clock from running. You just have to pull that out. You can set it, slide that back in, and it starts running again. And there we have it. That's 2 of them. I've got a 3rd one that's still drying under the lacquer right now, but you know, I made 3 just as easily as I made 1. So there is I think what Wood Magazine calls the ribbon clock. So again, thanks to Wood Magazine for providing the plans to everybody. And this is a really fun, very simple project. I urge everyone to give it a shot.